Hey guys, Ellie here, and today I want to talk about an experience that really shaped who I've become. Not my brain surgery or my progressive brain disease, which I usually talk about, but something that I feel like affected me because of my disability. After my brain surgery, I was left partially paralysed and vision impaired. You know that by now, probably. I recovered from my partial paralysis to the best of my ability, but I still limp and rely mostly on my right hand. I still struggle a lot with my vision. And after 7 years of a progressive brain disease, I really struggled to socialise. So it took a lot to throw myself into social situations at first. Now, I'm not upset at any of these things. I think they make me strong and they've made me who I am. But there are definitely people in the world who see those things as the perfect component of an easy target. So, at school, I had an experience that I don't think everyone does. I'd skipped 7 years of school. That's strange enough. That was because of my progressive brain disease. And when I got back to school, I spent the first few weeks sitting on my own listening to music because I just wasn't brave enough to throw myself into social situations yet. I hadn't spoken to anyone in a very long time. But that slowly changed. I had started talking to people who I recognised from some of my old classes, even though I'd barely been there. I made close friends with the captain of chess club, people on the environmental club, a whole heap of people who were really cool. But then, being typical Ellie, I saw someone who was sitting alone and didn't look like he really had many friends. So, I went over and tried to be his friend. We talked most days for a while, and he was very nice. But I think the problem is, at that point in time, I was just too trusting. I'd never spent time around people because I hadn't felt comfortable to when I was having seizures. So, I'd never really learned how to distinguish whether a person was the kind of person I wanted to be around or not. And this guy, I just decided to trust. Now, he asked me to go to the grade 11 formal event with him, the school ball. I said yes, and honestly, I really enjoyed that evening. I didn't realise at the time that what he was doing was actually keeping me from talking to anyone else, because he wouldn't have let me go and talk to my other friends that night. I didn't realise that he was actually forcing me into doing things that I'd told him I was uncomfortable with, like dancing when I didn't have an orthotic on and felt unstable. So, when he asked me to be his girlfriend at the end of the evening, I said yes. It didn't last very long. 1 week later, he'd kissed me at school. He'd taken me to a university open day, at which he'd called me a slut for no reason, and honestly made me feel really used. And he was just being very possessive and controlling. I knew that I didn't want that kind of energy in my life, but I didn't have the guts to say it to him. I dealt with it for 2 weeks, until he lied to me about just not being at school one day, when he was actually suspended. At that point, I knew I couldn't do it, and I ended it immediately. Over the next 2 years, things got pretty bad. I often got picked up from school late and had to wait in the common room because my mum was at work and she couldn't leave early because of me. That was okay. I'd been happy to wait up until that point. I had a phone, I had headphones, I could listen to music very happily. But the problem was, after everyone else had left, he was often at school. What would happen was, I'd be sitting in the common room, just scrolling my phone, and he'd corner me and say things like, "I'm going to make you love me," or "What are your sexual fantasies?" It was honestly very scary. It got to the point where I was terrified of going in the common room at school. I set up a contingency plan with my mum, so I would never have to be in the common room after school. But that made it really hard on her because her job was demanding. And that just wasn't fair. I shouldn't have had to put up with that, and neither should she. I told this guy he was scaring me, and things got worse. After school, in the holidays, I was on a committee. In fact, I was an editor of the school yearbook. I had to be there. I'd been doing this since the year I'd had my surgery. That year I hadn't officially been part of the committee. I just showed up with my sister when she was working on it. But I'd been a very hard-working member for this yearbook. But it was made significantly harder in my final year of school because the guy who was harassing me showed up even though it was holidays, and he started coming in to the room that we were working in, trying to convince the teachers in charge that he was meant to be in that room, not us. In the holidays, it got to the point where I was scared to even be in my own bedroom alone. I couldn't handle it, and during holidays, my mum was still working, and there was no other family home, so I had to be in the house alone. I started deadlocking the doors to feel safe. I stopped meditating because closing my eyes was just too scary. Honestly, it really affected me. He's actually the reason I picked up boxing. I decided I needed stress relief. I needed to control what I was feeling, and I wasn't meditating anymore, so I needed a new way to do that. I picked it up at Exercise Physiology, using focus mitts. It was really hard at first. One of my arms was paralysed 3 years ago. Of course it was hard. Boxing isn't easy for anyone. But it helped, and I actually started feeling my stress levels go down. It was really something that had been impacting me for a long time, and just getting my emotions out was the best thing I could have done. Even this year, I got a message from someone I don't know claiming to have been asked by this guy to message me. It will never be okay for anyone to be treated like that. I was in an environment where I should have been able to feel safe. I was surrounded by people who I should have felt safe around, except for that one guy. But that was enough for me to just be completely stressed for the entirety of my grade 11 and 12 experience. I'm so grateful for boxing because that really is what's fixed it for me. I'm not stressed anymore. Honestly, it's what it always comes back to for me. The therapists that have helped me to build strength, and the hard work I've put in. Because without those things, I wouldn't have been able to get myself feeling better. I always believe in putting in the effort because it will pay off.